Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Sarah, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to crochet these mushrooms right here. Now the really cool part about this pattern is that you can make these mushrooms pretty much any size. So this pattern you can adjust it pretty easily, which I will explain more as we go on. It's kind of complicated to explain it without any context. So we'll get into the pattern, and as I'm working on the pattern with you, then I will tell you how I adjust the stitch counts and everything to make different sizes. This is the smallest the pattern can be. The smaller you go, the less detail these have. At least that's what I have found. I've crocheted these guys a lot. I've been kind of experimenting with the pattern to see if there's a way to simplify this, but this is what I've come to, this mushroom right here. So at one point during this process, the mushroom will look like this. So it will look kind of strange, but that leads me to my next point, which is this pattern is not low sew. There is some sewing involved. While you're not attaching anything with sewing, you are going to be sewing the cap so that it sits really nicely. I've just found that this is really the only way to get such a nice cap, the way that the cap sits on the stem, if that makes sense. I just like the way this looks more. There might be simpler techniques out there if you all want to look for it, but this is just what works for me. Now, a very quick disclaimer before we get into this. This tutorial is designed for more intermediate crocheters. I'm not going to be explaining the stitches specifically, but I have lots of beginner-friendly tutorials if you need to refresh your memory. And I will say that if you are a beginner and you want to make these mushrooms, that isn't an issue at all. Just remember to slow the video down, pause it, replay it, and take breaks, especially if it's starting to frustrate you. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into materials. For materials, you can use any yarn type you want, and I recommend using 2 colors. So I will be using Naughty Pony in this red for the cap part of the mushroom, and then I will be using Sweet Snuggles Light in this cream color for the stem. Now for these little tiny guys here, I used Petite Pearl, so feel free, like I said, to use any yarn type you want. Just use the hook size that goes with it. So in this case, I'll be using a 5mm hook. But for the smaller ones, I do use a 3mm hook, for any of you curious. You'll also need a pair of scissors, a sewing needle or 2. It kind of depends on your yarn type and what you prefer working with. What we're going to be doing is sewing the cap down so that it sits on the stem better. So, you know, whatever needle works best for that, feel free to grab. You also need a tiny bit of stuffing depending on the yarn type. You may or may not need stuffing. It all just depends. Final note is I'm going to be using a piece of Petite Pearl. This is a size 4 yarn to start my magic ring. I just find that it makes a really nice, clean magic ring. I have a tutorial on magic rings if you are interested, but like I said, that just works for me. Let's go ahead and get crocheting. To start, we're going to make the cap. We start from the top and work down. So the way I do that is make my magic ring. Like I said, I'll be using my size 4 yarn, and then I'm going to chain 1 with my Naughty Pony, and then 6 single crochets into that magic ring. Once you finish, go ahead and close up your magic ring. You want it to be pretty tight, but we'll also tighten it a little bit more later. If you tighten it too much now, it might be hard to get into that first single crochet. For the second round, we are going to increase in each stitch. And here's that second round finished. So I'm going to go ahead and secure my magic ring. I do this by pulling all of these strings nice and tight and then tying the 2 smaller ends together. And then I tie the 2 smaller ends to the larger yarn type just for that extra bit of security. And that's what it looks like, nice and tight and clean looking. So now I'm going to explain how I adjust the size of this pattern. This is the smallest I recommend going, so just finishing the increase round. Now I'm going to go one more increase round so that I create that kind of medium size. So it'll be this kind of shape. really hope the camera is focusing the way it should be. But the rule of thumb for this is to do your increase rounds. Always start with a magic ring of 6, and then however many increase rounds you do will affect how many single crochet rounds you do next. So in this case, I'm going to be increasing, and then I'm going to single crochet 1. Let's say you go all the way up to 24 stitches. So that's increase single crochet 2. What you're going to do is divide 24 by 6, and whatever that total is how many single crochet rounds you're going to do for the cap. If you don't do any more increase rounds, you're going to do 2 rounds of single crochet rounds. If I do another round of increases, so I take that stitch count up to 18, then I'm going to do 3 single crochet rounds. I really hope that this makes sense. I think I'll probably put like a clear chart at the end of this video if you all want to see that, kind of just an idea of how this math is working. But I'm, like I said, going to do another increase round, so I'm going to increase single crochet and repeat that 6 times total. And here's my second round of increases finished. So I have a total of 18 stitches. Now, if I take that 18 stitches and I divide it by 6, we're going to get a total of 3. And that 3 means I'm going to be doing 3 single crochet rounds. Now, if I did another increase round and I went up to 24 stitches and divide that total by 6, I would do 4 single crochet rounds. And let's say you do a whole nother round of increases and your total's 30, then we'll divide that by 6 and we'll do 5 single crochet rounds. Now, presumably you could keep going on with this math forever, but I will note I have not tested it past 24 stitches total, so the ratios might start looking a little bit weird the bigger you get. I'm gonna do my 3 single crochet rounds now. Here are the 3 single crochet rounds finished, and this is what my cap is looking like. It is looking a little bit tall, which is actually the goal because we will be sewing the cap down a little bit. Now, the rule of thumb for the next round is to just decrease all the way around. So in this case, I'm going to be decreasing 9 times. But if I were to make the increases bigger, 24 stitches, I'd decrease 12 times. This round's really easy. Just decrease. Your stitches should be even no matter how many increase rounds you do. So just decrease all the way around. And here is what the cap is looking like now. I'm gonna go ahead and slip stitch into the next stitch, chain 1, and fasten off. Now, we're essentially gonna be color changing to our stem color, so in this case, cream. But I like to do this because I like to leave a length of yarn so that I can sew with this end later. So you need a nice long length of yarn. Now, if you change colors a different way, when you cut your red yarn, just make sure you leave a length of yarn. That way we don't have to join new yarn on later. Just makes life easier. So now I'm gonna go ahead and join the cream, which will be the stem color. And the way I do this is I insert my hook into the stitch next to the slip stitch, so that last decrease of our previous round. And then I take my end and I put it over my hook. Now in this case, because I want to put spots on the mushrooms, which you don't have to do depending on what colors you're using or anything, you don't have to put spots, but for the most part, spots make everything better. Because I'm going to be putting spots on the mushroom, I'm going to leave a nice length of yarn for this end too. That way we can embroider the spots using this end and not have to join more yarn on again. Once you yarn over, pull that yarn through, we're going to just go ahead and single crochet directly into that slip stitch. And then we're going to single crochet all the way around. So in this case, 9 single crochets. And because of the way I color changed, you're going to need to single crochet into that same stitch where we pulled up that original loop as well. That's the first round finished. So now what I like to do to make life a little bit easier, I like to pull the ends out now. So for the white end, I'm just going to go ahead and stick my hook through and pull it out wherever. On top of the mushroom though, that way it's out of our way completely. And then as for the red end, where we're going to be sewing is this first single crochet, or this last single crochet round. So I'm going to pull the loop right out here. So this is our decrease round, and then we have our single crochet round. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull that end through as well, just like that. So now both these ends are out of our way. Of course, you can always leave them inside, pull them out later with the sewing needle, but I just find it easier to do it now. Now, as for the stem, I've talked about the rest of the rounds and how I expand the pattern or shrink the pattern down. For the stem, you can really single crochet as many rounds as you want. I do have 2 notes about that. I think that you should do the same amount of rounds as the cap plus 1, because when we secure the cap to make that nice shape, you're going to lose a round for sure. So if you want them to be a little bit stubby like this, I would say 3 single crochet rounds plus 1. Let's say you did 4 single crochet rounds for the cap, you'd want to do at least 5 for the stem. If you want a longer mushroom stem, then you can obviously add more single crochet rounds until you are happy. I recommend probably only adding 2 or 3 to that total, just because any longer it might look weird, but that also depends on your project. So if you need some long stem mushrooms, go for it. But that's just my kind of rule of thumb when it comes to this. So for this guy, I'm gonna go ahead and single crochet 3 more rounds. And once you finish those single crochet rounds, you're going to go ahead and slip stitch, chain 1 and fasten off, and you'll want to leave a length of yarn for sewing. In this case, I'm just going to be leaving a short end so that I can join some nicer yarn on that's easier to sew with. And here's our mushroom. It doesn't look too mushroom-like at this point, but we're about to fix that. First, I need to change my camera battery because it is dying. And we're back. The first thing I like to do is finish the cap part, make it look as nice as possible, and then I like to embroider the spots, just because you don't know exactly where the spots are going to end up until you're done finishing the cap. So you're going to go ahead and take your red end, thread your needle. I'm going to be using my nice long metal one. Depending on your yarn type, you might want to stick with plastic, bigger eyes, whatever works for you. Knotty ponies are really easy to sew with, so I like to use the metal needle. So what we're going to do is you want to make sure that your end is between that decrease round and that last single crochet round like we talked about. What you're going to be doing is sewing this first round of the stem to 2 single crochet stitches of the cap. So because these are equal, this is 18 and this is 9, they can go into each other. What we're going to do is 1 and then 2. Hopefully that makes sense. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through that stitch of the stem, pull it nice and tight, and then I'm going to go through the next 2 stitches, these guys right here, of the cap, And while we're doing that, I like to use my thumb and kind of push those stitches underneath so that they really go inside and not stick out anything weird. And then go back through the stem and again through 2 stitches of the cap. This process doesn't need to be perfect because you can always come back around and add more stitches in there. So I'm just going to repeat this all the way around, so a total of 9 times. And depending on how you started, you might need to do a little bit of stitching just to clean up that first stitch that we did, which I'll show you in just a second here. But while I'm at it, I'm actually pushing the cap down onto the stem. That way the fabric folds in the way I want it to. So here I've come all the way back around and I've got a little bit of a situation here, so I'm just going to go ahead and go right back through the cap and clean it up a little bit and then bring that end to that next stitch. So here is what the mushroom is looking like. As you can see, we have that nice edge now, whereas before it didn't really look that mushroom-like. Here you can kind of see what I was talking about earlier, where that 4th round, that extra round you put in there, it will disappear. I recommend just using as many rounds as the stem plus 1. That way the mushroom doesn't look too stubby. This pattern is fully adjustable. It really isn't going to change too much. If you change things, you can adjust it to your liking. If you want the cap to be bigger or smaller, if you want the stem to be longer, all of those things you can do. What I'm gonna do right now is embroider some spots, and then once the embroidery is done, I'm gonna bring my white end over to my red, tie them nice and tight, and then tuck them into the shell. Or the cap. I don't know why I'm on about shells. But in order to embroider the spots, I just go through 1 stitch up and down, and I just go through it over and over until the spot is as big as I want it to be. And then once I'm done with that, I move over to a random stitch somewhere on the cap and continue. You want to make sure you're not pulling too tight when you move to a new stitch so that the cap doesn't get misshapen. Feel free to embroider as many spots as you want. I think this is probably good. Maybe it looks a little bit too even, but it's fine. I'm gonna go ahead and tie these 2 ends together like I said, and then go ahead and tuck them in. And then we will go ahead and stuff. So now we're going to stuff this, and I like to make sure that I get all the edges, and you don't want to overstuff. It's pretty easy to overstuff, but if you stuff it way too much, then you can kind of lose all that sewing we did to make it look really nice. So you just kind of want to find that balance, and it comes with practice. The more you make these, the easier it'll become. Now later on when I sew this mushroom onto the plushie, I will join some size 4 yarn and just tuck those ends right in once I do that. But here's the mushroom finished. Personally, I think that the mushrooms with 24 stitches around look the best, just because it's easier to get better details on a larger plushie, or a larger detail of a plushie. I don't know what you're gonna be using these mushrooms for. As with anything crochet related, it kind of reminds me of a Christmas tree in that sense. One side doesn't look as good as the other. So if you do sew this onto something, make sure that that back side is against something if possible. That is how I crochet my mushrooms for my dragons. You may have seen them. I think that you could really use these mushrooms on a ton of projects, wearables, crochet plushies, or on their own. The possibilities are endless, really. But I hope this tutorial was helpful. I hope that it made sense. I know it's actually really hard to explain my thought process when it comes to the actual round counts. So on the screen, I'm going to put like a little cheat sheet of the first 3 sizes. So the smallest, the medium, and the larger one. And then if you all want to experiment and make bigger mushrooms using those kind of math equations, then I would love to hear about it in the comments below. If this pattern worked out for you, please let me know, because like I said, I know this pattern is on the complicated side, and yeah, I just hope that it's easy enough for other people to follow as well, or at least worth it to follow. But that is all I have for you. It has been quite a while since I made a tutorial, so hopefully I still got it and I didn't forget anything. Well, I know I forgot to mention stitch markers in the beginning of this video, but other than that, I think we're good. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all your support recently. You know, I've been going through kind of a rough time in general, so I appreciate all of you being here. And without further ado, because you know I can talk forever, I'll see you in my next video. Bye!